We are down to the last turn of the game here, and it's looking pretty crazy. Let's take a quick look at replacements. One of the things you'll notice is with my ZOIs over the western portion of Japan, Antero can't put any replacements here. He doesn't have any reinforcements, but he can't put any replacements here either because of the ZOIs. And then something also that we discovered as we were playing through here, the overland logistics rules. That's one of the new supply rules in the reprint edition. You'll recall the overland logistics rule says that if you're tracing land supply, then you can only be tracing 4 movement points from either a supply eligible port or from the HQ in question. And you'll notice that from combined fleet, 4 movement points basically gets you to these 2 hexes. So the eastern end of Japan is out of range, and none of these are actually supply eligible ports because my zones of influence block the ability to trace by sea back to combined fleet, which is a requirement to create a supply eligible port. So what we realized after the fact was that these 2 guys here were out of supply, and so suffered attrition, which cost Antero 2 steps, which was great from my perspective because at this point in the game as the allies, you are looking to gain every activation you can, and in particular with the hand I had last turn and not being able to get ashore, I've got to land and try to take the main island this turn, so I'm going to need every possible activation I can get. So that's definitely helpful to have those 2 guys suffer attrition. And then Antero was able, he had a couple, he really sort of squeezed out the China divisions, and he still had a couple of more steps this last turn to reinforce or to replace to bring these guys up. So he's got a little bit of reserve there as well. And then I think I mentioned last turn that these guys are my main replacements this turn. The 2 Marines were flipped when they invaded Iwo Jima, but I've used my 2 ground steps to bring them back to full. So fortunately, at least, one of the advantages of not having had a lot of ASPs to spend, I also haven't killed off a lot of my ground steps, and in fact my ground forces are pretty much at full strength here. So I've got 2 corps and a Marine division there. I've got 2 more Marine divisions there. I've got 2 more corps and a Marine division at Ulithi, and I've got the last Marine division over here at Eniwetok. All those guys are at full strength, but I only have 8 ASPs at this point, and I've got to get ashore and take the entire main island. So let's take a quick pause and look at what's really involved in getting ashore in Japan. First thing to remember is that all of the hexes except 3606 here have an intrinsic defense, and that is a 1-step 12-12 unit. And so what that means is with the +3 against amphibious assault, there's a 40% chance of a 2 times result. The 2 times result on a 12 would be 24. Remembering that all my guys are going to be halved, 24 is actually 4 steps. And so that means that I need to be prepared, or the allies as they're invading, need to be prepared to lose 2 full units just going against an intrinsic defense with no other ground units in the hex. And so that means that the allies are going to have to be invading really with 3 units. For starters, if it were earlier in the game or at a point where I was actually having problems with political will, then I couldn't possibly risk the political will loss of having my entire force wiped out. So that would cause me to want to invade with 3 units so that somebody was sure to survive. But I also, with the number of ground forces he's got and his ability to just move somebody into a hex, I can't afford to invade with only 2 units and have my whole attack wiped out either, the political will question aside. So I've got to invade with 3 units, and I really need to be sure I'm going up against a situation where by the time I get to ground combat, there can't be any other ground units on the Japanese side supporting the intrinsic defense that I'm going up against. And so that means I'm going to need to, if we look at a typical military event, let's say I might have 7 or 8 activations, I'm going to need, at this point, I'll need 3 activations for ground units, and then I'm going to need a couple of more activations to ensure 100% chance that I could take out just one step. Let's say I'm invading Tokyo or Aminato, where there's just a 912. I still need, let's say, 2 CVs to ensure that I'm going to be able to take that step out so that it can't hit me back. So that now we're up to 5 activations, and now I'm going to need to pin 2 or 3 additional hexes depending on where I invade to make sure that those guys can't react into my invasion hex. So I'm pretty much using up, if I'm going with, with an average military event, I'm using up all the activations to get ashore in 1 hex. If I've got a weak event, it's problematic. If I've got a better event, it makes it easier. But that gives you a sense of what we're trying to do here. So ideally, I would be going up against completely empty hexes, empty other than the intrinsic defense. But it's going to be hard to do that. And in fact, I'm going to have to settle for going up against a hex probably with just 1 step in it to have a good chance to get ashore fairly quickly here. And that again was why I really wasn't able to invade last turn. You'll recall I spent my 1 real military event to take Iwo Jima. I attacked Iwo Jima and I pinned hoping to kill the rest of his air units. 2 of them got away, unfortunately, which created a lot of challenges for me for the rest of the turn. But having spent my 1 military event, at that point there was no way I was going to be able to invade because I just didn't have the pinning capability to prevent additional ground forces to react into whatever hex I invaded into. So essentially any invasion I tried last turn would have been a complete disaster. What we now need to do is take a look at what we can do with an initial card this turn to see if we can actually get ashore. To provide a little bit of suspense, I think I won't show you my whole hand at this point. I will say that I drew 3 military events and 3 OC cards. 2 of the military events are, well, you'll see them shortly. This is my best one here. So I didn't get Olympic and Coronet. In fact, Olympic and Coronet did not turn up for me at any point in this game, which is one of the risks you have of getting too many reshuffles. There's good things that happen with reshuffles, but there's also bad things that can happen. And in this case, I never did see Olympic and Coronet. But Iceberg is not a bad, if you're going to invade Japan, this is a great card to do it. It's an 8 on Central Pacific. And the one trick is there's a condition. Somebody's got to invade something within 10 hexes of Tokyo, but that's the whole point here is to invade Tokyo. So I've got 11 activations I can use with Iceberg here. And you'll see if we take a look at that stack, so I've got 1 corps and a Marine division that came from Ulithi here, and then the 2nd Marine Division was the one that came at Eniwetok. So I'm pulling the ones in from furthest away. And if we look again at the Tokyo battle hex, I've got the New Jersey there with the Enterprise supporting. So I've got enough. Remember, we're still at +3 because it's 45. So these guys are going to get at least a half times result, so that I will definitely kill that 912 under there. So my invasion here is guaranteed to be successful, although I'll have to see how many casualties I take. Then up here at Aminato, the goal really is I'm doing 2 things here. I'm trying to pin anybody who could possibly react into the hex, although Aminato is actually out of supply at this point, but I want to try and kill him anyway. And then at C, I've got to pin those guys so they can't react into the hex. At D, he can't react to the battle, but I'm going to try and take out as many steps as I can. And then E here, you'll see this is the Korean Army, and I'm going to try and take out as much of the Korean Army as I can too. So I've got 3 units going after him. And I do have to say here at this point that this is actually my 2nd attempt at an invasion. I played a good joke on myself. At some point last turn, I realized that not only is this 3606 the only hex without an intrinsic defense, but Kyoto is the only hex in the main island that doesn't have a port. And I sort of made a mental note. And, there's advantages to playing over an extended period of time when you can think about stuff, but there's also disadvantages. And the disadvantage sometimes is that you have a brilliant thought that you then promptly forget the next time you come back and look at it. So without thinking too much about it, I went ahead and planned an invasion of Kyoto, which has the nice aspect that you actually are cutting off combined fleet from anybody that might get supplier activation from it. But it also has the problem that there's no port there. And if you've got 12 or even 16 ASPs, if you happen to have Olympic and Coronet, and you've got normal ASPs for the game, then that might not be such a problem. But with me only having 8 ASPs, invading at Kyoto would have been a big mistake on my part. And so I worked out that whole invasion, and Antero was a scholar and a gentleman and pointed out the error of my ways and let me do a retake on the invasion. And so this is my second attempt here, which definitely is a better plan than the first Kyoto plan there. So just walking through the combat results here, this was an auto kill against that unit, and the only question being how much damage he did in return, and he ended up with a 1.5 times result, which for 12 is 18, so that's 3 steps, remembering that I'm halved on amphibious assault, so all 3 of my invading units are flipped there. So you can see, and that was about an average roll. So you're going to take a lot of damage when you invade. So the idea is to invade as little as possible here. Then at B, actually we got pretty much really good dice all the way through. He did have intel here, so I didn't get surprised, but the dice went in my favor on all these. I didn't roll any 2 or less dice here, so a lot of guys either, whoops, that guy wasn't supposed to get killed, he was only supposed to get flipped, so I'll put him back later, but this guy does get killed. And I got lucky here, and with, what did I have, 26, 36, I had 42, so I got enough that I did get a 1 times result on this one, and the Korean army is destroyed here as well. So you can see with a little bit, with heavy firepower from a major event and a little bit of decent rolling, the supporting ground units start to evaporate relatively quickly in Japan. So that's one of the things that the Allies need to count on. And again, that's a really important reason that the Allies want to take out the Japanese support units so that there's no air naval to protect those ground steps. And by the way, just to confirm, we have the same cards as the last couple of turns. I've got 6+1. Antero's got 4+2 because, as usual, 2 bomber hits and a sub hit. And so at this point, he plays Operation KE from the FO. And Operation KE is the special card that allows you to evacuate up to 3 units. You basically pick a hex and you can evacuate up to 3 units from that hex and any adjacent hexes. And you can perform a strat move with them. And the key special ability is that you can ignore allied ZOIs when you do that. And so this guy was a Terracan, and fortunately for me, he didn't have any situations where he could bring back 2 or 3 units. He could only bring back this one, but he's managed to sneak the reduced 15th Army into Nagoya here, which is 1 more activation that I'm going to need. At this point, I played my 1 pass to get it out of the way, and Antero now plays the Tokyo Express card, which was one of the events that I knew he still had in his hand. He was down to, I want to say, about a dozen or so cards left at this point, so I had a pretty good idea of what kinds of things could be showing up. I knew the Tokyo Express was in there, and he plays it, and at this point I'm starting to realize that I may have a problem because you'll notice he moved the ED Army from 3606 over to Kyoto here, but the key point is he plays Tokyo Express on Okinawa, and at this point I remember that he's also got high altitude interceptors, which gives him a couple of steps of aircraft, and I'm starting to not be very comfortable here. So with 3 OC cards in my hand, I'm concerned that I'm not going to have enough activations to do what I need to and take the entire island this turn. But I do have this Imperial HQ debate card, which is not worth anything as far as ISR goes at this point because he's only got ground forces left, but it does allow me to draw a strategy card. So I go ahead and play this for the event to draw, hoping to get a military event, and I actually get a halfway decent one, which you'll see a little bit later. So at this point, Antero makes his very brilliantly devious move with the high altitude interceptors. That gives him 2 steps of air replacements, which he puts into Okinawa. And you might look at that and say, now how the heck can he do that? But it's actually quite interesting. The constraints for reinforcement and replacement placement are, number 1, the units have to be in supply in the port or airfield in which they get placed, which they clearly are here because the Tokyo Express provides supply to the end of the turn. They can't be in an unneutralized enemy ZOI, and because my ZOI doesn't extend over Okinawa, I have no ZOI over the hex, so he's okay placing on that basis. And then the units need to be within activation range of an HQ that is capable of activating them. In other words, it has to be the right type of nationality. And of course, that doesn't matter for the Japanese because the Japanese HQs can activate all Japanese units. South is not in supply, but that's not a requirement. And Combined Fleet cannot trace to this guy, but that's not a requirement either. The units just have to be not under my ZOI and in a supplied hex and within activation range of an HQ that can activate them. So that's a legal placement for reinforcements or for replacements coming back from the dead pool. So he now suddenly has 2 air units on the map, which unfortunately for me are 2 more activations because I'm going to have to take those guys out. And actually, if I'm not careful and if I don't take them out right away, I'm going to have bigger problems because, in fact, South really is in supply here because South can trace from Sasebo, which is now under the protective ZOI of these guys. So at the moment before these guys were placed, South was not in supply. But once these guys are on the map, their ZOI provides a trace from Sasebo down to Saigon just fine, which means that potentially then he would be able to activate some of these other units. There's an army there that's not under my ZOI, there's an army here, and these guys could then potentially sneak back in somewhere. So I'm going to have to go ahead and take these guys out right away. So here I play Typhoon Task Force. That's 4 on Southwest or 3. I think I played it on Central, so it's 3 plus 3 is 6. It's 6 either way, but I think Central is in range here. And so I send 3 guys against his 2 air here, knowing that he's got a kamikaze that he might play. I want to really be sure I can take out these air. And what he does is he uses the kamikaze, but he uses it against at Battle C here, against Intrepid. So Intrepid was attacking the ED army here, and Intrepid in fact ends up being sunk by kamikazes, and so the ED army is still there. At Nagoya here, we are successful. Actually, it's a 100% chance. We take out the remains of the 15th Army there, so they go away, and then the 7th Air Division was killed by using itself as a kamikaze. So he goes to the dead pool, and in combat we defeat the other guys. So appropriately, at the bitter end, the kamikazes come out and do some damage, and also actually the last Air Division managed to get a crit against the CVs, and so hit the Hancock as well. So that was, I took fairly heavy damage in terms of 3 steps of CVs that turn, but I did eliminate his last 2 steps of air that he had managed to sneak in there. After that last play there, Antero got a draw for his kamikaze. So at that point, he had 2 cards remaining, including the draw, and 2 passes, which he hadn't used yet. So he went ahead and used his first pass, and I go ahead here then and play Trade Wind. And I'm starting to sort of work my plan to try to roll up Japan, but I'm running out of cards and wondering if I'm going to get there. And this is actually one of several points where the dice are fairly important. You'll notice what I did here was I took the 3 units that had invaded Tokyo and moved them overland to fight at Nagoya. There are no ground forces supporting, because I had taken out the 15th Army last turn, what I'm doing is I'm pinning the two guys that are within reaction range here so that no support can come in. And then you'll notice there's a corps here which I sent into Tokyo via strategic move. That was the second corps that came from Ulithi. So I'm using the extra activation to push more troops in for free. And again, because it's a strat move in port to port, well, it's a strat move to a port, and so it doesn't cost me any amphibious shipping points there. But here's the kind of funny die roll one on this. This is a situation where I've got 3 steps here, and I actually would not mind if he did some damage here at Nagoya. What I really don't want is for him not to do any damage. If he rolls low, if he gets a half times result on a 0, 1, or a 2 and does no damage, then I've only got these 3 steps here that I need to probably take another couple of hexes, and that's going to be difficult without additional steps. And so what I'm really hoping is that he'll do some damage so that I can bring in a full-strength reinforcing unit, which right now wouldn't fit here because it would be overstacked. So that's kind of an oddball die roll situation, and in fact he does get a 1 times result, and so he ends up eliminating the first corps there, which was exactly what I was hoping for. So I definitely got some luck on that one. Up here, remember, this 3606 has no intrinsic defense, and the last ground step can't be killed, so I can't actually kill this guy. I'm just pinning him from Essex to prevent him from moving in here. And over here, the ED army is going to die being attacked just by Bunker Hill, but what happened there was that Antero missed intel on that one, so this was an auto kill on the ED army there. So that turn did not go too badly for me, or that card rather did not go too badly for me. Antero plays his second pass at this point, and so I go ahead and pull out Black Day, which, as you recall, is an event, but only for air units, and so I'm going to use it as an OC here. So I use it on probably on Central Pacific, I think, and what I ended up doing was bringing in 2 more reinforcements here. So I brought in a corps and another Marine division at Tokyo, and I bring in another corps from Busan to Nagoya here. So I've now got a couple of, this is a totally full strength stack, and this is a 4-step stack here. And then I also need to go ahead and try to kill somebody with this. And so I attack Osaka, where I've got a full-strength army, and Osaka's attacked by a couple of CVs from Busan here. And once again, actually, the dice go in my favor as Antero fails intel, and so I have an automatic 1 times result, and so the 36th Army is going to die here. And on the one hand, most of these rolls that have been going in my favor are rolls that are, you know, sort of only 30% chance of success for Antero, but there have been a whole bunch of them that I've made, and so in the grand scheme of things, when you start looking at making all those 70%ers, the odds are not that great. And as I did some calculation here, it was I spent a fair amount of time sort of planning through this turn and thinking about how I wanted to do it. And one of the things that I figured out was that there were a whole lot of die rolls, and I needed most of them to go in my favor, or I was not going to have a chance to pull this off here. And so far, they have been going in my favor. And at this point, appropriately enough, Tojo resigns, which is just right for about this point in the game, I'd say. And that also causes political will to drop by 2. I think I was up to 5 and it went to 3. But again, because we were in good shape, we didn't have to worry about that. There was that one turn back there where if Tojo had come out, it would have cost me the game. But we managed to get through that one okay. And now Tojo finally has resigned. And in return, I play, and this was the event that I drew for my ISR card. And you can see it's actually, Reno 2 is a quite nice event. It's 7 on Southwest for 9. But one of the, let's go take a quick look here. You'll notice that Southwest is all the way down here in Townsville, and he's got a range of 20. And 20 is 1 hex short of the coast of Japan. So nobody in these hexes here could be activated by Southwest HQ. And so I realized at that point that it might have been smarter to put Southwest in Cairn. but nonetheless, he is where he is, which means that I can't activate him, so I end up having to activate Central Pacific on this card for 4 plus 3 gives me 7. And what I do here is the forces at Nagoya march overland against Kyoto. The 2 corps from Tokyo move against Aminato. The Essex is just going to pin this 912 here. It can't actually do any damage. And Bunker Hill is going to go ahead and take a shot at the full-strength army with Combined Fleet and Cure. Antero does make intel okay, but again, my dice are pretty decent. The Bunker Hill gets a hit. This is a 30% chance to miss there, so that helps because, again, every step here is an activation, and a miss is an activation wasted that I basically have to do over. So again, the good luck with the dice continues to hold up. Here, that's an auto win. The 14th Corps is flipped, and at Aminato, that's an auto win, and a low roll for the Japanese means no damage against my 2 corps there. So at this point, Antero plays his last card. He actually just discards it. It's a kamikaze that he drew when he had his first kamikaze, I think, and there's really nothing he can do with it here, so he just goes ahead and discards it. So this is where it starts to get even more interesting. You'll notice that I have 3 hexes here that I still need to take. 3606, which, despite the fact that it's not a port, it's not a city, doesn't have an intrinsic defense, it's still one of the hexes in the main island that the Allies have to control to win the game. There's also Osaka, and there's Cure. So that's 3 battle hexes. I have 2 cards left, and they're both OCs, so that could be a problem. So let's take a look at those last 2 cards, and as it turns out, one of them is Roosevelt Nimitz MacArthur, and this is an ISR ender, and it's got the bonus that if you play it as the event, you have an option to discard and pull something out of the discard pile. So I can go ahead and play that as the event, and then I can play Curtis LeMay or discard Curtis LeMay. And in exchange for Curtis LeMay, I can pull Iceberg out of the discard pile. So that means I'm getting to play Iceberg actually twice in this turn, which is pretty phenomenal. About the only thing that would be better than that would be playing Olympic and Coronet twice in the turn. So I've got 11 activations here, and you can see how I'm going to finish this off. Basically, you'll recall I had 8 ASPs and I used 4 for my initial invasion of Tokyo. So I've got 4 more ASPs that I can use. So what I'm doing here is I've got a full-strength Marine at Busan, and I've got these Marines at Iwo Jima, and I've also got a half-strength Corps over here. So that's 5 steps. So that's enough that no matter what happens, I win that battle there. So that one's going to be successful. Then over here, I've got the Marines coming from Tokyo and the Corps coming from Aminato. So again, I've got enough that even on a half times result, I'm going to win that one. And then at Cure here, I can go in with this entire stack supported by the CVs, and the stack will give me enough to also kill this guy. So only with the phenomenal luck of being able to pull Iceberg out of the discard pile and play it twice in one turn do I end up with enough battle hexes and activations to actually be able to land and complete the conquest of the main island in one turn. And I will say again that that would not have been a possible outcome if Antero had not been gracious enough to let me replay my botched first invasion attempt. It also would never have happened without the phenomenal cards. If you go back and count, I actually had 5 military event cards that I got to play, including Iceberg twice there. And so if you look at the averages over the 2 turns, actually, I had about 50% good military events in my deck. And so I would have expected to get 3 on turn 11 and 3 on turn 12. But I think ACTS, just to make it exciting, only gave me 1 on turn 11, and it gave me the other 5 on turn 12 to make up for it. And actually, the double Iceberg really more than made up for it, because even with 5 normal events, I would not have been able to have sufficient activations. There was just too much stuff going on here in Japan with the combination of all the ground forces that he had there, as well as being able to, that brilliant and devious play to bring back 2 air steps over here that I then had to kill so that they didn't wreak more havoc over here in Japan. And honestly, even with all that, it was still only about 50-50 at best that I would get the die rolls that I needed to have enough activations to finish it off. If I had missed a couple of those die rolls and had to redo a couple of those attacks, I would have run out of activations here and not have been able to finish this off. So this is where things end up in Japan. And let's also zoom out here so you can get a little more sense of where things end up overall. At least look at the rest of the map there. I definitely want to do wrap up with a little bit more conversation and analysis, but I know there's been a fair amount of interest in just seeing how this turned out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and post this. We're already over 30 minutes, and I will do one final video that'll have some final commentary and thoughts.